Just stepping in quick to let you know that our audio on this episode is going to make us sound like we're a little bit further away from the mics than you would probably like. And that's just because our computer was picking up our audio instead of our mics. But the good news is that our guest today is coming through crystal clear, so you'll be able to hear every single thing that she has to share with us. Enjoy.
So this episode, I think, is coming out February 16th, I think.
I don't remember.
Third week of February.
Sometime in February.
I'm pretty sure it's episode 27.
I never know that.
I know.
Yeah, never, not once.
Episode 27. So welcome, listeners. And this week we have something different, something special. We are joined by Jamie, the neurodivergent nurse. You might already follow her on Instagram or listen to her podcast, but we are super pumped to have her with us today, and we're going to be asking her a whole bunch of questions. So take it away. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up on our podcast?
Sure. Thanks, number one, for inviting me on. I'm so excited. We actually got to chat, I guess maybe it was back in November that we had like a little meet and greet, and we got to become great friends, and I loved every minute. So I've been looking so forward to today coming to be able to spend time with you again. But yeah, my name is Jamie. I am a registered nurse, and as you said, I have a great Instagram account that really is all about ADHD, and it is helping other people recognize symptoms of ADHD, as well as feeling like they're part of a community and feeling like they're not going through the struggle that comes along with it alone, as well as some funny things just to be like, oh, somebody else does that dumb thing too. That's hilarious. But that's really what that account is about. The podcast itself is a little bit more of, even though it says the neurodivergent nurse, it doesn't really cover things in healthcare. It covers ADHD, whether it's time management issues, whether it's motivation. I also have some great guests that are on from time to time as well. Like I just put out an episode with a stylist who taught us how to plan appropriately to wear clothes that is just not overwhelming to us, or to go out and buy things with purpose, because if you're like me, it's all or nothing. I'm going to buy 8 of those outfits instead of being able to look and see what I need. But it's just that kind of stuff on the podcast.
This is one of 4 identical sweaters I have in different colors. So
yes, ma'am.
And Katie will laugh because I'm constantly buying things in 4 different neutrals. But then I don't ever have to worry about matching because I just know everything will go together.
Uh-huh. My husband will ask me, he'll say, so what shade of black are you wearing today? Because that's pretty much the only color that I own. I'll have the same black sweater, like 5 of them. Yeah.
Garrett dressed up as Wednesday Addams one year for Halloween at work, and nobody understood that she was wearing it.
And I didn't have to buy anything. It was all stuff that I just had.
Yeah, she got really mad about it, actually.
I did. I was mostly mad because I had added eye bags in that were much harder. And it took half the day for somebody to be like, oh, is that Wednesday Addams? I was like, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good if you add eye bags and that's what gives it away, because that would just be another Monday for me. So
yeah, that was wild.
Or just didn't wear cover up, one of the two.
Right, yeah. Lately it's been the cover up for me.
Yes.
My eye bags have been out of control.
Yeah.
So do you have an ADHD yourself? Or is this just something?
I was diagnosed in December of 2020, which was not very long ago. So only 2 years ago did I get my ADHD diagnosis. And in February, I think, is whenever I started the Instagram account and the podcast, somewhere around in there.
So what was the catalyst for you to get that diagnosis?
That is a great question. Well, one of my good friends, she kindly and gently asked me one day if I have ever been evaluated for ADHD. And in my head, I thought ADHD was what a lot of people think. It's the 6-year-old kid that's bouncing around and can't stay in their seat. That little boy, he's just always on the go, and we're going to give him medicine to subdue him.
Mhm.
That type of thing. So that was what I thought. And that certainly did not look like the picture of me ever.
Yeah.
And the things that she saw was more of, I was very sensitive to rejection, that I dealt with imposter syndrome, that I always felt like I lucked into my roles and awards or anything that I did. It was just because I got lucky. And I never felt good enough, and I never felt smart enough, and things like that. And in one of my whining to a friend moment, that was when she asked me, because too, I thought that just being rejected or being sensitive to rejection was just part of me and who I
Right.
was and my makeup.
And that's amazing too, because those are symptoms I didn't realize were symptoms until we really got into this research.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, the rejection sensitivity dysphoria that we did, I'm still amazed by. The same thing with the emotional dysregulation, I think was like really shocking for me. So it's really interesting to me that those are what she picked up on
Yeah.
as indicators, as opposed to, can you just please focus on this one thing for 5 minutes, which is, I think, so common for people to have be what makes them think maybe I need to be evaluated.
And my sensitivity to rejection was pretty severe. And I dealt a lot with social anxiety as a teenager, and even into my 20s, there would be times where I couldn't walk by a mirror and look in it for weeks at a time without crying. Or I remember having panic attacks because my friend said that she wasn't going to be at a race that I was at, and we had planned to go there, and I could not make myself get out of the car to walk up to where a group was standing to applaud people that I did know that were running across a finish line, and just being paralyzed by that feeling and trapped in my own body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So did you have an anxiety diagnosis before you had your ADHD diagnosis?
No, I mean, I was just aware of it. I didn't feel like I needed to have a diagnosis, that it was something that I needed to try to work through.
Mm-hmm.
And I did do a lot of work with it, but I'm from the South. Mental health is not one of those things that is well advertised or well, what is the word that I'm looking for? It's not condoned much here. There's so much lack of awareness that it's not a dirty word,
which is so
seek
tragic.
mental health.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, a lot of that, I think we can still, we're, from up north, but it can still eke its way in to an extent. Like I
think definitely age-based.
Yeah.
I mean, I even see the awareness that like Gen Z has, and I'm amazed. I'm like, man, good for you that you're having those conversations at 17 instead of stumbling into it at 37. It's just really amazing to me. So, I mean, I think that's a positive part of it, that it is becoming more of a conversation. I think one of the positives of social media really is connecting people that have those types of issues and kind of allowing more maybe open and honest communication that they would be comfortable having in person too, since that's what we relied on and were really awkward as teenagers. So
yeah,
that we
Who's not. Are there teenagers that aren't awkward?
I don't know. Some of the ones I see now, I'm like,
oh yeah.
I'm like, well, shoot, yeah, like you're 14 and you're cooler than me. And
I was about to say, and I still don't look like that.
So, so when it was pointed out to you, like, have you ever been evaluated? Did you really have to like fight your providers for that diagnosis? Did you have kind of an in because you're a nurse and you knew who to ask, or was there anything? The end. I don't know. There was no way to better phrase that question.
I didn't know where to start. I didn't know, do you start with a therapist who can diagnose you with it? And that took a bit of time to try to figure out. And I have a best friend who is a physician here in town. So you would think I would just ask him, hey, how do I go about this? But I was so in the dark on what to do. And as I searched, we have in North Carolina this place called the Attention Specialist, and they deal with adult ADHD as well as children, but they have psychiatrists. And that was the other thing. I thought, okay, if I go to a psychologist, I found out obviously they cannot prescribe medication. I didn't know. Maybe medication was something that I was going to want to do. And many people, they do utilize their primary care providers. But I think, personally, just my opinion, that ADHD, especially in women and adults, is often missed by your PCP because that's not their specialty. So if I had a stroke, I wouldn't go to my, general practitioner and be like, hey, what do I need to do about this stroke I just had? I would go see a neurologist and a neurosurgeon and go where these people specialize in it because they are going to have the best information. Thankfully, I found that attention center, and they made me fill out a lot of information about myself. They made me have someone close to me answer a lot of questions about me as well.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it was especially interesting because it was my mom. I'm her only child, and we've always been very, very close. And I was asking her questions saying, like, do I plan well? And she's like, oh, you plan well. You're going to plan to the smallest detail. You're going to spend more time actually planning to do something than that actual task will take you to do. And I was like, do I do that? And then you realize, yes, I do. But that was also an interesting process of finding out so much about me that I thought that I knew, had no idea. Yeah. And so they had me fill out the information, someone close to me fill out the information. And then when I went in, I think it took me a month to be seen as a new person. I also had to take this, they put something on my head and they gave me a clicker. And they left me in a room for 20 minutes, and there was a circle that would pop up on the screen and a square, and there were 3 different colors. You would hit the clicker if it was the same shape and the same color that repeated. So every time it would repeat, you would hit it. And it would gauge the amount that you move. That was what that thing on my head was for. So they could see how much I was moving during this test, how fast I was. And they gave it to me to compare to how neurotypical people do, and how great I did. But then you could see going into 20 minutes where neurotypical people, they stayed at the same level, but I got slower and slower because I was getting really bored and other thoughts are coming into my head and my focus is different. So that combination is what led them to saying, yes, you have ADHD.
And from like a real brain science perspective too, if they're doing an actual experiment as opposed to a questionnaire, which I think is how a lot of people wind up with the diagnosis.
Yeah. And there was actually a study that I read for our impulsivity episode where there was a similar study to what you're describing, and they were measuring how much time elapsed between pushing that button and whatever color was supposed to be on the screen. And they would like flash them faster and basically almost like red light, green light, but measuring how many you got wrong based on your impulsivity. And they were trying to like see how fast you would just try to get the right answer, because the goal was to push the button as fast as possible. They tell you that's the goal. So like that's your sole purpose, which I would fail at that test so much.
Me too.
Yeah. I would push that button all of the time.
If I push this more, will this end?
I'd just be so excited to win. And then I would end up losing.
Yeah.
And then I would get so mad. I'm like, I'm worthless. I should have never done this. Why did I ever think? Because that's my instant response to not being perfect at something. So yeah, those games would not be good for me.
I feel like I vary with that. Like sometimes I can...
Yep, you do. It's either extreme confidence with no concern, or this is a terrible idea, we should never do this. One of the two.
Yeah.
Not a lot of middle ground with that.
No.
With Katie.
No.
That is interesting to me though, because like when I was diagnosed, I was kind of just going through like a I guess like not a mental health crisis, but just a very difficult time, and started seeing a psychiatrist, and we were talking, and I was just like in a job that wasn't good for me, and I just like wasn't doing well. And we were talking about it, and I just kept saying to her, I feel like I've got like a beehive in my head every day. Like I just like, and I also had a job that required me to just, beyond multitasking, be able to have 100 plates spinning at once. And I was crashing. I just like wasn't doing well. And she literally cut me off one day. I was like, no, you've got ADHD. That's why. I was like, oh. And that was the extent of my evaluation. So I'm always like interested when, to hear the different criteria that different places are using to make that diagnosis.
And two, for me, it felt like, do you remember those wind tunnel machines that would have the dollar bills like flying all around that you get into, and they turn it on, that fan's at the bottom, and you're trying to grab the dollars and stuff them in your pocket and hold on to it at the same time? Mm-hmm. That's what my head felt like with thoughts.
That's a great metaphor.
And and they prescribed me Vyvanse was what I started. And then of course they upped it multiple times. But when I took it several hours after I had first taken the medication and things started to get quiet inside my head, I was like, is this how other people live?
Yeah.
What an unfair world I've been a part of for 36 years. No wonder I struggled in nursing school. No wonder you can take a test and actually hear what you're reading and think about it, and not all the other things being
plus the song that's stuck in your head and your grocery list and
oh my god, that's exactly how I felt when I got medicated finally, because it was just that exact thing of like, which is why I think a lot of the neurotypical advice, quote unquote, is just focus. Just pay attention. Just
buy a planner.
Yeah,
please.
Just
have you tried that yet? Using a planner?
Have you tried writing things down?
Right. Or like reading, like just put your finger on the line that you're reading and go down the page. Well, no, because then I'm going to pick up different cool looking words with my finger.
And then I can't see 4 words at the bottom of the page that have nothing to do with the line I'm on reading.
Or I'm looking at my finger the whole time and I'm really focused on my finger going over the words as I read. And then I don't know what I read because I was so focused on making sure that my finger was going at the right pace, the right speed.
Yes.
Or didn't block the words.
I need to get my nails done, or
I should get a nail file. It's turning into a hangnail.
Yeah, let me go do that. And it's amazing. I just recently started on Zoloft for like a seasonal depression, and realized within like a week I wasn't having these like spirals, these like anxiety, just like where I'm swirling the drain, and these really like peaks and valleys in mood, and just like how I was like my general well-being, like I just felt even. And something stressful came up, and I kind of looked at my spouse and I was like, well, I'm not too worried about that for like X, Y, and Z reasons, and was able to just like completely logically address it. And I was kind of had that moment where I'm going, is this how normal people feel all the time? Is this
how nice of a world would that be to not have that knee-jerk reaction, but like knee-jerk initiation, right? Because it just keeps going from there. It's not one reaction, like you said. It's this whole
chain of
vortex,
right?
No, true. It's it was very, I mean, that's kind of what inspired our podcast, was that feeling of like, wait a minute, the whole time you all were just quiet inside?
Yes.
What? Yes. Like, you could just pick up your laundry off the floor. You didn't have to step over it until you tripped 3 times. And then you were finally inspired to put it into the hamper right next to where it was on the floor.
Yes. Or people that can I've always been amazed at people that can just sit and work. Yeah. Like with a period at the end of it. Where it's not like, I'll find myself 6 times during the day texting my spouse like, hey, you know what we should do, with some elaborate plan that I'm thinking of while I'm doing my work. Yeah. That my brain is just, it is like, sometimes I feel like I'm on like a faster treadmill. Yeah. And I'm just going so quick, and everybody else is going normal speed. And then I'm also impatient. So I'm like, what? Why is everybody going so slow?
Yeah, the impatience really is.
Yes.
is fierce sometimes.
It is.
So when you got your diagnosis, apart from thinking like, holy cow, I can't believe how quiet everything is, did that change your experience, especially professionally as a nurse, and change your perception of yourself and how you thought other people were perceiving you?
It 1000% changed how I saw myself. When I was in there and the psychiatrist told me, you do have ADHD and you have social anxiety, I started crying because I felt like she was a carbon copy of me, number one. She understood because I cheered middle school, high school, and college. I was captain in college. Like, I was the top girl. I didn't mind if people would look at me because it was something I was great at. And that they saw that greatness. They didn't see Jamie. But then after practice, walking, let's say we had a place called the Bears Den at college that was full of students, and I'm so thirsty, I couldn't open the door to go in where the vending machine was because everybody would turn around and look at me, and I had to go get in my car and drive across town to go get something to drink. Mm-hmm. And she understood that, and she actually started telling me, I bet you've had this experience and that experience, and this is how you felt. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt seen in that way. And I broke down. I was crying. And I suddenly realized I wasn't lazy. I wasn't a snob. I wasn't a slob. Nobody's ever thought I was a snob. But like, I wasn't all the things that I have told myself for over 3 decades. And also what other people, including my ex-husband, called me on a daily basis. That it wasn't a characteristic of Jamie. It was a characteristic of ADHD. And that completely changed how I started going about existing in the world.
Mm-hmm. That's lovely.
At work, it was a lot better too. I think that it's mostly due to the medication, though, because it helps a lot with social anxiety as well. Mm-hmm. And I would sit there, and if my coworker, there's only 2 of us on a team for the 12 hours, and if my coworker didn't talk in the last 10 minutes, I would be thinking, did I say something wrong? Does he hate me? Did I do something that I shouldn't have done and I didn't realize it? Did I talk too much a couple minutes ago? And I would just go through that for 12 hours a shift, worrying about something that I did. Or if I actually didn't do something correctly, then I was going to worry, they think I'm an idiot. They know that I don't deserve to be here. They're going to try to get me off of this team, even though they all love me. You know, they're going to find a way that they can actually have someone that's smart, that someone deserves to be on this rapid response team. And that started changing too with the diagnosis and the medication, where now I'm thinking, you know what? You are lucky to have me. I'm the person who knows neuro the best on this team. And I am also so lucky to have you because you know cardiac and you teach me so much. I teach you so much. And when I receive compliments, I actually accept them. And I believe that they are compliments to me, that they're not a favor. You know?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I've definitely walked away from somebody giving me a genuine compliment thinking, oh, they're only saying that to me for this reason. Or, you know, they're only saying that because of this, like this exception, not because
they feel really sorry for me.
Right.
So they need to they have to say that because they really feel sorry for me because of who I am.
Feeling, you know, feeling like, oh, they don't know that I just am lucky.
Yep.
And I didn't actually do that. I just got lucky, and you know, the chip, like that happens to me a lot actually. Cause I do appellate arguments. So it's all written submissions. So if we win, like I've had opposing counsel, you know, say, oh, that was a great argument, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, you know, I can talk myself out of any compliment. Well, you know, the facts are really in my favor. It's just that their witness was really poor. Not like financially, like they were just a poor witness.
Right.
They were just bad at it.
But, so there's like so many different things that I can talk myself out of, but yeah, there's a certain part of it where I think having that diagnosis, now I can be like, no, I did the damn thing. Like, fuck you. I'm great.
Yeah.
Like,
yep. without having that inner monologue of totally talking yourself out of that and being convinced that there's a motive or that it's not real or it's fake or, you know, whatever it is, to really be able to genuinely accept that there's a lot of personal growth that comes with that too.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think about like the way that kind of embeds itself. What, you know, when I'm upset, sometimes I'll think, well, okay, remember that one time when somebody said to me that I was really good at this and like how that made me feel. And it, you know, to kind of like boost myself up sometimes, because it's so easy to get into that spiral when you get knocked down.
I've also noticed at work too that not only do I not hit those downward spirals like I used to, I get frustrated when physicians don't listen to me. And before, I wouldn't get as mad. I'm like, okay, well, they're a doctor. They know what they're talking about more than I do. But now there's times where I'm like, no, what I'm telling you is, because, you know, we're 911 inside the hospital. So a lot of times the doctors don't come to the bed. We do. And when I call you and I tell you this is what a patient needs and this is how I feel, and they give me pushback, I've learned, no, I need to push back too, because I do know what I'm talking about in this situation. Whereas before, I would be more timid and no, if this patient has the best outcome by this intervention, then I'm going to push forward unless you can tell me why they don't and not just say no.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that about my 30s, I think, too. It's feeling a little bit more self-assured and a little bit more confident when and choosing when I'm using that confidence, you know, not just saying, you know, something confidently all the time, but really pick and choosing when I really do feel good about something and then being able to advocate that point and not feel timid is a good word for it. Yeah. I think that's come a lot like in my 30s. I've noticed that, which is great.
I like being feeling entitled to take up space.
Yeah.
Even if I'm observing or something, but yeah, I agree. I think that's into the 30s plus my diagnosis has really been that, like, I deserve to be in this room.
I think this podcast too. I mean, it's made us, like, I definitely got my diagnosis and kind of, I don't know, shrugged it off and was like, well, like, there's nothing I can do to change it. So it is what it is. I medicated for a while and then stopped and, you know, only did it like when I needed to, like when I really needed to focus, and didn't really think too much about it. And then when you were diagnosed, I was like, oh yeah, and kind of thought about it a little bit more. And we started this podcast and all the research, and there's just so many things. Like, even I would say almost every episode we do, there are moments where one of us is like, oh my God, I didn't realize that that's happening for this reason.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been like an evolving thing, but the confidence that it's given, at least speaking for myself, sometimes we'll say to each other, like, we're business owners, and we kind of like get a little giddy for a minute, but it's really like, no, sometimes I do know what I'm talking about. And sometimes I do feel like I'm entitled to share my opinion. And I definitely think it's made me more confident in a lot of different areas. I think 30s podcast diagnosis, has just put me in a much better place than I was 10 years ago.
And on the flip side, when I don't know something, I don't feel like a failure because I don't know it.
Yeah.
My mom used to tell me all the time, and she would say, Jamie, no one knows everything. It's okay that you don't know this, that you are starting at the beginning, because everyone started as a beginner when they did these things. And I would still be so ashamed that I wasn't all knowing in these areas. And it was so embarrassing. And it's even that, allowing myself to be imperfect to other people and not feel so just self-loathing because of it has come along with that diagnosis as well.
Totally. I think a lot of that for me comes out of in school. I mean, I did really well in grade school, but part of doing well in school is knowing the answers. So then it turns into that thing of like, well, if
being
I don't
the first
know,
one to raise your hand.
Yeah. If I don't know the answer, then I better shut up because like I'm stupid. Whereas because
somebody else knows the answer.
Yeah.
I thought I was smarter than them.
A lot of things, you know, and I think especially for women and what hinders diagnosis earlier is that a lot of people with ADHD are extremely intelligent and can handle the structure of school pretty well, especially if you're not, like you said, that 6-year-old who just can't sit still. Then you get missed. And so especially if you're doing well in school and you don't have like dyslexia or dyscalculia that is otherwise kind of hindering your advancement in education, then for a long time, it really was my identity that I was just naturally good at school. And then I went to law school and I stopped that. It was way harder.
Yeah.
I couldn't just like review my class notes and take a final and be set. No.
Yeah, because I pretty much coasted, and I was a daydreamer, and you know would just sit. I remember I got yelled at one time for looking out the window, and it was like October and it was snowing, and I was like 9. It's snowing, and I got yelled at ruthlessly by my teacher.
She did 20 minutes before we got on the call and said,
literally did.
Is it supposed to be snowing today? And it was snowing outside, and I was like, well,
pretty heavy,
yeah, all signs point to yes. I don't know.
So nothing's changed. But I think and we talk about that a lot too in the podcast, I just think there's so many women our age where now this is coming up as a topic and it's like, wait a second. And I've actually had 2 different people in my life who have reached out to me since the podcast came out. Like, you know what? I was just talking to, you know, my doctor, or I was talking to my therapist, and they mentioned this to me as an possible ADHD diagnosis. And I'm like, oh my God, that's great that you're getting clarity, because I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh my God, that's what's going on this whole time. So I think there is, I think one of our big goals is like removing the stigma of all the things that come with it, in addition to how great it is to have the clarification. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Let me mute this.
I mean, that was perfect timing.
Oh,
the clarification. Bing.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? That's a good point. That was good timing.
Oh yeah, can you like mute notifications?
Oh no. Yep, I can. Let's see.
Garrett's laptop is a menace.
It is.
Our podcast on the reg. But usually we're just in the same room and we don't have to worry about
yeah, it's usually not a big deal.
We can mute the laptop and it's no problem.
Okay, that should be better, I really hope. Not on my microphone. That's close. So were there any tools, like I noticed after I was diagnosed, and I would say really doing the podcast too, that there were all of these little things, structure I had built into my life that were done to counteract these symptoms of ADHD that I didn't realize I was doing for that reason. Like, were there things that you do that you were doing because of ADHD that you did not realize until diagnosis?
No, not so much. Because I mean, I don't have a very routine-oriented life. So I didn't have to quite do the structures that a lot of people utilize, because I don't have to be up at 8:00 Monday through Friday and work from 8 to 5 and those types of things. So my day has always been, you know, just kind of like wherever the wind blows, that's how I'm going to be. But I will say I didn't realize or recognize that I loved travel nursing. I did it for 4 years, passionately loved it. And I didn't realize it's because people with ADHD enjoy novelty so much and enjoy seeing new things and learning new things. But that wasn't quite built into the structure. It was just something that I learned to do that I really enjoyed. That was based on my type of brain.
Oh, I totally get it. Yeah. I mean, that's why I love the law. It's like I get to solve a new puzzle every day I go into work and put the pieces together. And you know, sometimes it's all the same. Like your patients might be on the neuro floor and have some sort of neurological issue, but the exact cause of it or the exact presentation of it can
Right.
vary from person to person. And the same goes for my cases. Generally the facts are all the same. I do workers' comp. It's an injured person. I mean, it is what it is. But the circumstances of it are just a little bit different in every case. So I get to solve a new thing. And it's kind of like that cheerleading thing. Like I could go to court and I have no problem standing up there and making my argument. I know I'm good. It's just afterwards, if you want to talk to me in the hallway, that I'll break out in hives and pass out in my car afterwards.
Right. Yes. Which, I mean, rapid response now, it's exactly like what you're saying that you love so much. We get a call and say, hey, my patient, their heart rate's 150. Can you come up and see them? Sure, I can come up and see them. And now I get to figure out, well, is this a cardiac issue? Do they have a bloodstream infection that we aren't treating? So let me review the labs and see, oh, well, their white count has gone up 5 points. Is there a source of infection that it could be? And start putting all of that together and then activate like a code sepsis to fix the patient instead of saying, hey, let me give you something that's going to make your heart stop for a couple seconds and restart, and let's hope that's what works, and which would cause more damage because we don't take care of the underlying problem. Yes, I love puzzles. I love work puzzle, that type of thing.
Right.
Puzzles, no, thank you. That's for really the birds.
Jokus, but
and I think there's a lot of like something that I've started doing. I used to, and I don't know if it's pre-diagnosis or if it's just being in a different point in my life. And I think it's part of that confidence that we were talking about, but I would try and like square peg round hole and try and force myself to do things that didn't work for me because that's what other people were doing. And that's what I should be able to do. And like setting myself up for failure all the time. Mm-hmm. And I've just started trying to work with myself instead of against myself and find a way for something to work for me that maybe isn't the way everybody else is doing it.
I will also add, because you mentioned that something stood out. I struggled so much as a nursing student. I struggled even once I became a nurse and passed the boards. With working in the ICU, everything's a priority to us, right? We don't know how to prioritize because everything is either an emergency or it's not. We can't figure out. I mean, if somebody's heart stops beating, obviously that's going to bump giving blood pressure medication over here. But
good call.
When astute assessment. I didn't get that great 100 nurses this year in North Carolina for nothing. But so I really struggled with being able to keep up with every lab that was due at a certain time and medications that are due and all of that. And I could not understand how I would still be running around taking care of my patients and my coworkers would be sitting and charting. How are they doing this? And then nurses have what's called a nurse's brain. It's kind of like our report sheet, but I developed a sheet that was absolutely perfect for me to keep up with all the things that needed to be done, all of like the input and output, history that neurotypical people who don't have ADHD will not want as too much work for them. But for me, it made me successful. So if you have any nursing students or ICU nurses that are listening and they want a copy of that brain sheet that I'm talking about, they can shoot me an email at theneurodivergentnurse@gmail.com and I'll be happy to send it over to you to make your life a little bit easier too.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's interesting that we ended up connecting the way we did, but since we're the daughters of nurses.
Yeah, that's funny.
So, which is also kind of wild because I'll speak for my mom anyway. My mom for sure has it. Was tied to a chair in kindergarten because she wouldn't sit still. But yeah, she was a floor nurse in labor and delivery for like 15 years. She did CCU, ICU. Mm-hmm. Then she was in the OR for 10 or 12 years and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, and I think that also led to my non-diagnosis because she was like, well, I got tied to a chair. You're doing fine.
People like that. Well, don't worry about it. Right. Yeah, my mom would listen to some of the podcasts and I got a text message from her and she's like, I was just listening and I think I might have ADHD. And I was like, That's new information.
Oh, for sure your dog was going to shoot
For one of us.
for Eddie.
There's time. My dog was not tolerant of being in a separate space from me and is insisting on laying behind me or traveling around the room, I guess.
I have two in my lap, don't worry.
Yeah. The way he's stretched, I was like, he's going to fart. I can tell. I'm just going to get smacked in the face with a dog fart.
Yep. That happens too sometimes. So I told her there's still time. He still could. Oh, that's nice. Okay, settle down. Do you have any tips? I mean, as a medical professional, people who are looking to be evaluated or diagnosed, advocating for themselves? Because I know, like, I personally have a hard time advocating for myself in a medical setting.
Yes, of course. If anyone is seeking to be evaluated, one of the things that I highly recommend is getting a notebook and a planner. No, I'm just kidding. But really, getting a notebook and writing down the things that come to their mind when they think, oh, I am lazy. I have a hard time. If I have a test coming up in a week or a paper that's due in a week at midnight on Friday, I start my paper at 10 p.m., all the research and writing it to turn it in by midnight. Write those things down, because when you are face-to-face with a provider, you're going to forget. The provider, when I was sitting there, she said, what sounds really bother you? And I was like, no, there's no sounds that bother me. Yes, there are. Anything that is loud and sudden, I can feel it on my skin. There's even sounds like at nighttime, if everything else is quiet around me and I hear something outside, I can literally feel it. I hate loud sounds. I close my ears whenever I'm watching fireworks. So yeah, write down the things that come to your mind that you think would potentially point towards ADHD, because you may not remember it, and it may be very important to share that with them so they know what they're working with.
Garrett is dying a little bit inside.
There's so many sounds.
Yeah, she really struggles with sounds. Although her husband called us both out. He was installing like a new coffee bar thing.
Yeah.
And made like this loud metal on granite noise or something, and we both went, ah!
And he was like, calm down.
What is wrong with the ADHD kids? Yeah. But like, yeah, we both got called out so hard by it, but it was so involuntary.
Yes.
But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. If I have my eyes closed at night and there's a loud noise, I can like see the color of the noise, like in the back of my eyelids.
Feel it in my teeth or my spine. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm just psychic or whatever bullshit explanation I gave to that before. And not that I'm sensitive to sounds. That wouldn't make sense. It's gotta be that I'm psychic.
And I mean, really, sensory stuff, until we started doing this podcast, I thought I was just quirky when it came to that. I mean, there's just material I don't like and things I don't like to touch. And I realized as we were talking about it recently, and I was like, my mom has certain textures she won't touch. My grandmother has certain textures she won't touch. So it's just like funny to look at it in this context. I'm like, that just makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Totally makes sense. Or if my sleeve gets wet, it's the end of the world.
No, that's true though. So yeah, that's a great idea, having a notebook on hand to write that down as it kind of happens.
And if you are a woman, if you're a female, oftentimes we will be diagnosed with anxiety and not ADHD or depression. That's another first step diagnosis. If you truly believe that you have ADHD, which you may believe that you have it and you don't, that's also a possibility. And there's nothing wrong with that. It may, quote unquote, just be depression or anxiety, which is also terrible to deal with and difficult in many ways. But if you honestly believe it and you go and you see a provider and they tell you, nope, you don't have this, you can have a second opinion. You not all doctors, not all PAs, not all nurse practitioners are created equal. And they're not going to be right 1000% of the time. And it doesn't make you a bad person. You don't seem like you are drug seeking by seeking something that you think will benefit you in the long run, because you have to live your life, not that nurse practitioner, not that medical doctor. So it's difficult because even though I'm diagnosed, I still get anxious going back to my I have checkups every 3 months
Yeah.
with my attention specialist, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be the day that they're going to say you're an imposter. You just wanted meds because you're going to go to medical school one day, and I got you figured out. No, it's not. It's because these really have been struggles all of my life.
Yeah.
So it's okay if you have those feelings and you have that fear of being rejected and saying, no, you shouldn't even ask this or be concerned about this. No, you should. And don't give up on the first no if you get a no the first time, especially if it's from a specialist too.
Okay, that's great, because I think
Yeah.
I would have a harder time challenging a specialist.
But I mean, again, they're not all the same. There's been times with neuro and a neuro ICU, for example, that I was working at, that I'm not going to say where it was, but this person was having this complication in their brain where their vessels would start to spasm. So it would clamp down. That means blood flow is not getting to your brain because the vessels are clamping, which can be damaging. It's like a stroke, but if any organ in your body doesn't get fed blood long enough, it starts to die. There are bad effects of that. So I tell the doctor when he comes by, hey, I noticed she has on a nicotine patch. And nicotine causes your vessels to constrict. It causes them to clamp down. But she's naturally going through this because of a brain injury she just had. So I'm sure it was an oversight, whatever. I just want to let you know so that you can discontinue the nicotine patch. And he told me that that was just a theory. The nicotine causes vasoconstriction.
What? Didn't they make that whole movie about it called Thank You for Smoking? Where the guy was like, the only reason I survived is because I'm so unhealthy with all these coughing.
Yeah, and I mean, I've worked at Johns Hopkins, Mass Gen, Yale, Duke.
Right.
A lot of the top, I've worked at 6 of the top 50 hospitals in the country for neurology and neurosurgery. So just an example of how not all doctors, even the specialists, are created equal.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I was like in my early 20s and had all of these symptoms of polycystic ovarian, and said to my gynecologist at one of my like annual checkups, I think I have this. Like, I have all of these other things. And he immediately said, no, you don't have that. That's not what's going on.
Wasn't that after you went to the ER with a ruptured ovary?
I had an ovarian cyst rupture like a couple years before that, and wound up in the emergency room. And he looked me right in the face and said, oh no, that's not what's going on. And I mean, like 5-6 years later, after the same conversation with him every time, I happened to see somebody else at the same practice. And the first thing she asked me when she walked in, after looking at my chart, has anybody ever talked to you about polycystic ovarian? And I was like, I'm going to scream. I'm going to scream. Ask your colleague about it, because I mentioned it to him 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's really, like for me, it was very frustrating because I'm like 20. I'm not going to tell this adult man who's been practicing medicine for 25 years that I think he's wrong. So I just accepted it and then just kept continuing to deal with the same things I was dealing with.
Yeah. Are you seeing a lot of pushback or animosity to the, I guess like TikTok diagnoses or self-diagnoses kind of wave that we're in because of, I think, more the pandemic than TikTok? But
I've heard of it, of people saying that it's not valid. One, I hear people say a lot of times that a self-diagnosis is not valid. It absolutely is. You're not self-medicating. I hope you're not self-medicating, because sometimes undiagnosed ADHD, you do misuse substances. There's a certain link between undiagnosed ADHD and substance misuse. So I hope that you're not self-medicating. But if you feel like you have ADHD and you go on and you follow my account or anyone else who gives great tips on how to deal with things like time blindness, here are some steps to take instead, and that works for you, then great. Keep looking into those people. Like, you find things that work because you decided that you have ADHD. Who is that hurting? It's only benefiting you. But I do hear that people are complaining about it, but I think it's just because of the awareness that's out there now. That now we're recognizing a community of people who are experiencing the same things, but these people have a diagnosis. So if you're also going through the same things in your life and you're two different people living on two parts of the country, then yeah, maybe, just maybe, that could be it. And you never would have thought of it before. Like me, I never suspected it.
Yeah.
So I hear those things. I just don't agree with it. I think it's real silly. I don't know why anyone would want to be a gatekeeper over mental health, but that's why we have this crisis that we have now.
Exactly.
Because everyone needs to be gatekeepers, and we can't allow everybody in who suspects that there could be something that could help them.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I mean, it's not pie. There's plenty of mental illness to go around.
Yes. And I mean, how many generations of people have suffered with terrible symptoms for so long and just thought that, I mean, internalized it and, I'm just flawed, or there's just something wrong with me. And that's just the way it is. Like, I better just live with it as opposed to having avenues.
Yeah. And I mean, that's great. Some people do. They're just going to live with it and deal with it. And that's wonderful. But I want the best chance to have the happiest life that I can have. I want a very fulfilling life. And with that came for me not worrying every 2 minutes if someone hates me. For that, it's me being able to walk out in public and not feel ashamed of myself. I didn't realize how debilitating my life was and how much I was held back from my own self until the last 2 years. And I don't wish that on anyone else. But if they do choose that and they just want to live with it and handle it, that's also absolutely acceptable. However you choose to go about your life and what works for you, as long as you're not hurting anyone else, period, then do you.
Fully agree.
Yeah.
I think I couldn't think of a better way to end our episode, really. Yeah. That was really well put. Good job. It's like you do this.
It's almost like you're unprofessional.
This has been delightful, and very validating. And of course, every time we talk to you, we buzz about it for weeks afterwards. Yep. So we're already super pumped. Yeah.
I love it too. I know. I can't wait.
Yeah. So, listeners, we will be guesting on Jamie's podcast, the Neurodivergent Nurse podcast. So make sure you give that podcast a follow and subscribe to it so that you get notified, and we'll of course talk about when that episode comes out as well. But yeah, in the meantime,
what's a good send off?
I don't know.
We usually have we'll tie it into whatever we talked about. And we usually just kind of stumble through it and then laugh at the end is usually our routine.
Yeah. Be kind to yourself.
Yeah, be kind to yourself and talk about things that are going on with other people that are having the same problem. Because it's way easier to deal with things when you're not dealing with them by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Because the bar is ankle high.
Yeah.
Bye.
Can you tell that we've never interviewed but somebody on our podcast before? We forgot to ask her during the episode, but you can find Jamie, the neurodivergent nurse, on Instagram at the neurodivergent nurse, and you can find her online on her website at theneurodivergentnurse.com. And her podcast comes out every other week on all podcast streaming platforms, and her podcast is also called The Neurodivergent Nurse. She is super friendly, super engaged on social media, and I'm sure you would really get a lot out of following her today. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be here next Thursday with another episode to tingle your ear holes. In the meantime, the best way to support us is to follow us on Instagram at The Bar is Ankle High, and to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on your preferred podcast streaming platform. We have merch that you can find at bit.ly/anklehighmerch, and you can even support us on Patreon if you have a few dollars to spare and you want access to ad-free episodes and bonus episodes. We have a lot of fun over there, and those bonus episodes get posted every other Monday. So you can get double the Ankle High Pod in your life whenever you want it. You can find a link to that at the link in our bio on Instagram or at patreon.com/thebarIsAnkleHigh. Until then, remember to be kind to yourself because the bar is ankle high.